This isn't just another post-budget interview. We've already had ours for the record. This is a one-of-a-kind show where we will agree to disagree on everything in the union budget. In the next 40-odd minutes, we will discuss and debate some of the things that my panel here does not like about the budget. There is a lot of praise that is already out in the public space. This is Budget Bash Up, and Minister of State for Finance Jayant Sinha has very kindly consented to take critics and criticism head on. And please, my panel will seek my indulgence. I in fact seek your indulgence to keep coming back to the course why we are here, which is really the bash up. Thanks each one of you for being with us, and most of all, thank you very much, Minister of State for Finance Jayant Sinha. I'm also joined by Dr. Rajiv, Kumar, Mythili Bhusnurmath, Surjit, Bhalla, and of course Sanjeev Sanyal. Let's just set the context right, and I'm not going to go over the big picture because that is what we discussed yesterday. I will come to that in just a bit, but I want to first draw your attention to a backlash of sorts on social media, and I know my panel here is divided on it of sorts. People believe the rich are worse off after your budget, but the middle class seems to be clamoring for this whole big brotherly attitude on EPF. Can you set the record straight of with what's happening there, and then of course my panel takes over and back.
Yes, so let me clarify this whole Provident Fund matter. There is some very clear economic logic that's driving it. But first of all, I want to explain that it pertains only to EPFO and NPS. Public Provident Fund is not included. Even in EPFO, all those people who are making only 15,000 rupees a month or less are not included, and that is 3 crore or so of the 3.7 crore subscribers in EPFO. The third thing that everybody should be very clear about is that this is not retrospective, obviously, this is prospective. And this is a proposal we brought in through the finance bill to ensure that prospectively, and this is largely for private sector employees because government of course is under NPS already right now, that prospectively public sector employees making more than 15,000 rupees a month should be indifferent from putting their money in the Provident Fund, EPFO, or putting it into NPS. So what we're trying to do in this is to be able to put NPS on par with EPF. Now NPS right now is EET, which means that money you put in is tax exempt, money grows on a tax exempt basis, but when you withdraw it, whether you withdraw it and put it into an annuity or you just withdraw it, you have to pay tax on it. So what we've done in this is that we've improved matters for NPS. So in NPS now what happens is that 40% can be withdrawn without paying any taxes. 60% if you put into an annuity, right, you will not have to pay any tax for putting it into an annuity. The annuity will then generate some income. That income you will obviously have to pay tax on. That's what NPS is going to be like. And going forward, we are saying to make EPFO on par with NPS, let's treat EPFO in exactly the same way for people who make more than 15,000 rupees a month, which is about 60 to 70 lakh people.
So the budget right now says it is going to be corpus plus interest. Are you going to remove the corpus from there, and are you thinking about the interest?
Well, obviously this was our proposal, and we think this is the economically sound and right way to think about long-term savings, because when you start to withdraw the money, it's not to be spent at that time, it's really to provide you retirement income. So we want to create a disincentive for you to withdraw all the money and spend it. It's really to generate retirement income. Now, as we have done this, we have received a lot of representations today, obviously, from many people saying that they don't like the proposal. So all of this right now is under consideration to see what is the right way to move forward.
I think it's the big brotherly attitude of the government that's perhaps upsetting a lot of people, including Sanjeev here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't like the idea that the government should decide how much I should leave in there or not. Once I've saved it, it's my money and I should decide. But quite apart from that, I have a different, another issue that I want to take with it. I do feel that there was an opportunity here of radically simplifying the personal and income tax, and yet I feel that you've kept up with the minutiae approach to personal income tax, i.e. put in 50,000 here, we'll give you something off, another 20,000 rupees here. Why not simplify the whole thing, give everybody a massive, maybe 7 lakh upfront standard deduction, and then get rid of all exemptions and then have clear, simple slabs. It would be so much simpler for everybody. I'm sure the middle class would like it, and I'm sure it will also improve tax collections in terms of efficiency, etc.
But just one. On the EPFO and the NPS, is it that those earning more than 15,000 rupees per month, their contributions are going to be taxed now?
No,
the employers
please understand the tax implications. Sorry? Please understand, and I want to correct something that Sanjeev said, and which a lot of people have said to me on social media, which is, this is my money, how can the government dare to touch it? Remember, of course, that if you had put it in a bank fixed deposit, first you would have had to pay tax on your gross income. Yeah. Then you would have put it in a bank fixed deposit, and there would have been a TDS on that interest income. So the government is giving you incentives for long-term savings and for retirement income. So this is tax exempt pre-tax income that you're putting into EPFO or NPS. Then it's growing on a tax-free basis thereafter, and it's compounding for a long period of time without you having to pay any taxes on it. So the government has given you all these incentives not to immediately withdraw and spend, so that you will have retirement income for 20-25 years in your retirement.
Perhaps the people less than 15,000 are most in need of that old age security, whereas
yeah, so they are not. So we are saying they are not. They are getting triple E, Mythili. No, they are getting triple E.
But if the idea is that you don't want them to withdraw and spend all the money at maturity, you want to compel them and direct them towards annuities, then perhaps you should do it most of all for those who are at the lower income level, because they are the people who are ill-informed, not very financially literate, and likely to spend the corpus. So you should do this, if at all, to those who are at the lower income rather than at the higher income.
I think that's a fair point. That is
a fair suggestion, and perhaps will be.
The IMA people came back to me and said that all contributions by employers for those getting more than 50,000 are going to be taxed, and that's created a bit of a...
what we have said there is, right now the employer contribution is only capped up to 12% of salary. So we are saying 12% of salary or 1.5 lakhs, whichever is lesser. So we brought that cap also as well, so that it doesn't become a backdoor way for employers to give people an opportunity to avoid paying tax. So we have to prevent that as well. Around the world, there is usually a cap on what you can put into retirement savings, and so this is very consistent.
So let's just take a break from EPFO and come to the personal tax question before I move on to the big picture of being transformative and incremental. You want to take Sanjeev's question on this? This was a good chance to simplify things. You haven't done that.
Obviously, as far as corporate taxes are concerned, we are massively simplifying corporate taxes. We've said we'll move to 25% and really simplify the exemptions. If you look at what we're doing in dispute resolution and what we're doing in litigation, what we're doing in appeals, we are massively simplifying that as well. And we've said all along, as far as our tax policy is concerned, we want it to be simple, we want it to be stable, we want it to be predictable. So while we're doing corporate taxes, we're doing disputes and resolutions, you're now bringing up individual taxes. We'll work on that as well.
I have a question on the individual taxes side, and that is that studies show that basically about half of the income of those people who owe taxes do not pay that. In other words, the government can double its tax revenue if everybody paid what they were supposed to pay, and which is only about 21% of the population. So I think slabs make a lot of sense to me. I think what you've done for the below 5 lakhs also makes very, very good economic sense. My question is, what is there now? We've got technology and all the rest, and what are the plans in order to tap this excess savings on the part of individuals and lack of savings for the government?
Just to substantiate what Surjit is saying, the current direct personal income tax net is what? 3.6 crore, 36 million people.
About 4 crore people. About 6, 7.
It's about 4 crore people, but you have to really look at it not in terms of individuals. You have to look at it in terms of households. So I think in terms of being able to get people into the tax net, we've done a rather good job.
I'm asking how do you get the...
I think that... Sorry, go ahead, Rajiv.
And you got 250 million, 25 crore households. You do all the deductions of below the poverty line, agriculture, this, that. You can still get up to about 12 crore. Households, you know, that's the maximal, and 8 is the minimum.
Here, how do you widen the tax base?
How do you widen the tax net, but how do you get people to pay the full amount of money that they are liable to pay?
We are working through all those strategies, and Surjit has touched on probably the single most important problem that we face as a state in India, which is that we have an under-resourced, ill-equipped state to deliver the public services and the public goods that India needs right now. Our tax to GDP, state plus center, is 16 to 17%. China is about 21%. The US is 25%. The OECD average is 34.6%. Mexico, Brazil, Turkey, Russia, all our comparable countries are much higher than us. If we could even get from 16-17% to 20%, it would make a incredible difference. No, I think Surjit is exactly right. It is not really a question of getting more people in the tax net. Where we fall short is in compliance. And you know what really is a problem is that we have to come up with some societal norms. People have to really think about the legitimate taxes that they should be paying and really genuinely pay those taxes.
A lot of people who don't pay taxes say, my tax doesn't get me the infrastructure it does in the West. I must move away from taxation onto the other big question, which I know my panel is divided on. Some of them believe this is a transformative budget. Others believe it's at best incremental. I'm going to first leave it to Mythili because she doesn't think it's transformative, to say the least.
Well, I must confess, Minister, I'm a bit of a minority over here because everybody's given you so many bouquets. I perhaps am the only one. It's not quite a brickbat, but I must say I'm a little disappointed.
Well, this is budget bashing, so you can bash away.
No, since right from yesterday, I've been a little disappointed on primarily on two accounts. One, I think the fiscal maths doesn't quite add up, and I'll tell you why I think that way. And secondly, I feel this was an opportunity that was lost because you have been, virtue cannot be its own reward, as it were, especially in politics. And here was a time when you had all your fiscal numbers, you've done much better than what you had even projected earlier. In fact, in absolute terms, your fiscal deficit is 20,000 crores less. So here was a chance for you to provide the trigger for growth by spending on the right things, by taking a slightly more nuanced view of the fiscal deficit and maybe targeting it as, say, something like 3.8, because that extra 30 basis points would have given you close to 40,000 crores, and that you could have added to your recapitalization budget. So I think both on the fiscal maths, where your revenue is slightly estimated and your expenditure is slightly conservative, as well as on the fact that you didn't use the fiscal leeway that you really needed to use in order to get growth ticking.
So now that you moved on to the fiscal deficit, I'm going to get Dr. Kumar's questions as well and bunch it all up.
The fact is that your capital expenditure outlay is now down to 1.65% of GDP as compared to 1.75 last year, when this was the year that you really needed to ramp up that capital expenditure because of the private corporate investment just not coming off at all.
Right.
So, and we had all been saying some of this, but for some reason or the other, your increase in capital expenditure is a mere 4%. And I don't know why that is so.
So two questions
you're actually risking something.
First on the capital expenditure bit, and B on the fiscal deficit bit. We perhaps would have bashed you more if you had breached it, and now we are bashing you for keeping in line with the fiscal deficit. Exactly. But do you believe you've given into pressure that was building up?
I should have been on the revenue deficit, not on the fiscal deficit. Your attempt should have been to crowd in privatization.
Let's get him now.
I quite disagree with the left side over here, but...
No, obviously, as far as this debate of the fiscal deficit is concerned, we have the doves and the hawks. And obviously we had to balance all of that out, as Honorable Finance Minister has also explained on multiple occasions. And we think we took the right approach, which is really to hold something back, because the reality is right now we are living in a world where we could have some major external shocks, and we have to make sure that we are fiscally prudent right now, that we have the firewalls in place, and that we are really pursuing macroeconomic stability.
So you have a cushion mentally in your mind that you could perhaps breach?
No, I don't mean it the cushion in that sense. The cushion actually, I believe, is going to be from the debt dynamics and the monetary side. That's where the cushion is, because if you really look at where the policy space is right now, on the fiscal side we are walking a tightrope. We have very limited room on the fiscal side. On the monetary side, and we have to open up more policy space on the monetary side, that's the space that we have to create, and that's what we've created in the budget, because between weak global aggregate demand, negative real interest rates as policy rates in other economies, and at the same
positive rates
exactly, and of course the differential between the super high real interest rates in India and the subdued inflationary pressures in India, we already are in an environment where there's significant policy space on the monetary side. So we need to be tight on the fiscal side and much looser on the monetary side, not the other way around.
So how much? So when do you expect the RBI to cut rates, if I may? And how much of a rate cut is North Block now expecting, considering you've kept your promise and thrown the ball back in there?
What is the point? How much are you leading on the Reserve Bank of India, subtly or not so subtly, to cut?
Well, this seems to be the season for unsolicited advice, shall we say.
No, but,
Okay,
but Minister,
in
your debt dynamics, actually, if you look at it, the government's debt dynamics have
I
come
might
through
remind
dramatically.
this very august panel that we've gone from bond yields of close to 8% down to 7.62% today,
So that's
and the rupee, of course, has stabilized yesterday and today. So I think overall,
but your debt dynamics
those debt dynamics are
if in
now
case-
starting to come and play out as we had
No,
thought.
but if
So
in
I will
case-
agree with you that on the debt dynamics being in your favor, and I agree, unless you have very much cheaper capital, and by the way, I'm on a limb saying that we can reduce interest rates by 150 basis points given the inflation, so I'm sure you like that idea. But I think that the government hasn't also played its entire part, and I'll tell you why. One of the reasons that the interest rates are not falling is because you are not cutting your small savings, EPF, PPF rates. That is in fact, I know from several people in the RBI, they grumble about that all the time. Now, you may say that that is politically difficult and so on, but then you can't blame the RBI for not doing its bit of the,
You can't have high expectations.
I really hesitate to wade into this debate given that I have four very distinguished economists on my left. I'm just a simple engineer, so I don't want to venture.
India's fiscal policy.
I don't want to venture into this
No,
territory.
but Mr. Minister, one question, that suppose, and God forbid, the RBI doesn't oblige and the private sector does remain as conservative as it has been, that it's not attracted in putting out money. What is your backup option to revive the investment demand?
I think you're taking an overly pessimistic view. Our own sense is that we have, as far as capex is concerned, loaded it up as much as we could. Remember that there's an execution capacity issue as well. And remember also that we have off-budgetary resources. Between NIF, NABARD, PFC, REC, NHAI, IRFC and the Higher Education Financing Agency and NHB right now, we have a tremendous amount of dry powder from an off-budgetary perspective, which we have also, primed up. And I'm not sure I agree with your capex numbers. I'll have to go back and look at exactly how you've computed that, because our own sense is,
several commentators have
okay,
said,
I'll have to go and study that carefully, because our sense was that between what we're doing as far as the budget is concerned and what the off-budgetary resources are concerned, remember that NIF, which we have been operationalizing this year, is going to be fully operational next year. So I think that will add a tremendous amount of
numbers,
we have a tremendous amount of off-budgetary capacity as well that's ready to go, and our limiting factor, Rajiv, right now is actually not capital. It's really much more the execution capacity on the ground to be able to make things happen. And that's really where that's the constraining factor.
That is where you could have taken that public-private route, which is that you could have had private contractors, for example.
That is exactly why we are cleaning up. You can see in the budget, we've talked about the PPP framework, we've talked about the Public Utilities Disputes Act and so on. So in all those different areas, we are really working very hard to be able to build up execution capacity on capex and public investment.
But so if I may come in with a question here, Mythili, just 1 second. If I may come in with a question here, it's all very good that capital expenditure is at high levels of budget financing. The idea really is to crowd in the private investments, and you and I both know why they are not investing. It doesn't have a lot to do with you. They are sitting on very, very stressed balance sheets. Could there have been a stimulus from the government as far as stressed sectors are concerned, and auto, steel, sectors like that?
Supriya, it's already happened. If you look at what we've done in steel, what we are doing right now in terms of consideration as far as aluminum is concerned, if you look at sugar, textiles, roads, power, these are the sectors where there's stress. Wherever structural reforms are required, we've already, in many cases, already put in place those structural reforms. And if you look at the resolution process, even without the bankruptcy code, we have significantly strengthened the resolution process through the JLFs, the CDRs and the SDRs. There are 29 SDRs going on right now, and every day you open the papers and you see companies monetizing their assets.
But in steel, apart from the anti-dumping duty that you've got, we've
got a minimum import price that we've
but there's nothing much to improve the competitiveness of the sector.
No buyer for the SDRs. There's absolutely no buyer.
No, that's not true. Absolutely incorrect. The SDRs in many cases have attracted buyers. Part of what we're doing on the ARC side is to be able to strengthen the ARC so that they can step in. As far as NIF is concerned, NIF is going to have a stressed assets fund. There are other private sector stressed assets funds that have come into play. All of them are looking at these stressed assets. Wherever the deal can close, the deal will close.
Why was your special situations bank that you yourself had mentioned earlier, why did that idea not find place in the budget?
We've already announced it, and we've already said what we've tried to do in the budget is really focus on new announcements, not policy announcements we made already. We've already announced NIF. We've already said that NIF is going to have a stressed assets fund if that is commercially viable. We are just waiting for the CEO appointment process to conclude so that the fund can be launched. As of now, we've appointed IIFCL as an interim investment advisor. They're looking at a range of these stressed asset situations to see whether there are commercially viable opportunities.
So will it take the stressed assets off the bank balance sheets entirely?
Obviously, there will be a deal that will have to be struck between, what the expectation on prices are for, people who are buying the stressed assets and people who want to sell the stressed assets. And in all of this, because we still don't have a bulletproof resolution process in SDR, we're going to have to make sure that existing promoters are willing to come along on this.
We were having
so all of this is going on.
Bank NPAs, and because we're talking about banking and the stress assets, we must talk to you about this. If the idea was to recap, and Mythili here believes you should not recap, and Dr. Bhalla believes you should, 25,000 crore according to him is a very, it's a very small amount. You want to articulate your question around that, and then maybe Sanjeev and Dr. Rajiv.
Okay, I want to go back to a little bit on the taxation, on what I think is one of the few deficiencies in the budget from my point of view.
Right.
Is the tinkering with the custom duty rates. You've introduced or changed the slab rates or whatever it is, rather than having a very open regime. So this is, I guess, to protect the stressed out sectors. But I would say that is not quite the right way to do it.
Surjit, that's the difference between being an economist and an engineer right there. You see, the engineer lives in the real world. The economist has his theories.
In the real political world.
In the real world. So you learn very quickly as an engineer or even as an investor, which I have been for many years, to have sort of very straightforward, simple heuristics and practical rules of thumbs to do things. An economist is thinking about equilibrium, but the reality, of course, in the real world is you're dealing with transitions and adjustments all the time. We have a situation right now where many of our industries are not globally competitive because of inverted duty structures or various other structural disadvantages that they have. So in the real world, we have to tweak a little bit. We have to set the dial in some ways so that our domestic manufacturing industries in areas such as electronics manufacturing, in defense, in textiles and so on, are genuinely able to be globally competitive. I don't have to tell you, distinguished economists, what many other countries such as China and Vietnam and others are doing in terms of advantaging their manufacturing. So we have to find ways in which we can make our industries much more competitive and be able to create jobs for exports as well. That's part of what we are trying to do.
I must turn to the banks now. Sanjeev, you have a question.
And engineers like to turn dials.
You have a question on the banks.
Well, I do think that the biggest risk to the Indian economy right now is really the banking sector. I think even you will recognize that there is a serious problem and risk that there might be a major gridlocking of the financial sector if nothing is done very quickly. You put in 25,000 crores, and I think most people will agree that by itself it's not going to solve the problem. It's an enormous lakhs of crores worth that has to be unwound. So what are the next steps? Can you give us some sense of what you expect to do and do quickly over the next 6 to 9 months?
For the record, is this the first tranche? Is there more coming?
I believe we have a very robust process underway for transforming our public sector banks.
Right.
This is a process that's been underway for a year and a half. The fact that we've got this asset quality review coming to a conclusion, the fact that we have fully recognized the NPA problem is good news.
Sure, yes.
Not bad news.
No,
which is why I think a lot of the narrative right now is misplaced.
You at least know what the damage is.
But Minister, that's provided it doesn't
So the first phase, please understand, the first phase was fixing governance and management of these public sector banks. We did that through Indradhanush and so on. The second phase was the AQR and the stress testing, which we've done done in very close collaboration with the RBI, so we have a system-wide view of what the stock of stressed assets are and what we need to do to really resolve some of these, and that's exactly what we've done now.
Right.
We've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is the roadmap for recognition and classification. We've agreed on a March 2017 type of roadmap to be able to do that. So all of that has been agreed. We've spent a lot of time working through it, understanding what the capitalization requirements are, etc. Now, with respect to the 25,000 crore numbers, please understand we've run, thousands of cases and spreadsheets for all these different banks to understand what it is that they need to have to be always above all the RBI and the Basel III requirements. I can assure you that by March 31st, 2016, April 1, 2016, despite all of the write-offs and the provisioning, not a single bank, given our 25,000 crores in the next fiscal year and the 25,000 crores we are putting in this fiscal year, is going to be in breach of any of those capital adequacy norms. So every bank is going to be perfectly well provisioned as a result of that. Now, with that done and the NPA problem out in the open and being tackled in this way, and the stock of stressed assets bounded at about 8 lakh crores, we move on to the next phase, which is what we've announced in the budget. And what is the next phase? The next phase is the consolidation phase. We needed the Bank Board Bureau to be in place to be able to do that. We are very fortunate to have a very eminent group of people led by Shri Vinod Rai ji as the chairman of the Bank Board Bureau. The Bank Board Bureau has to now work with each of the individual banks and their boards. We've said all along it has to be a bottoms-up process so that they can see what we can do to create a much stronger, more competitive set of public sector banks. The reality, as you all know very well, is that the banking landscape is being thoroughly transformed, and we need much stronger, much more competitive banks, and we are now unleashing that third phase of this whole process of transforming the public sector banks.
How realistic is in the economic survey, to answer or help answer Sanjeev's question, there was this cheeky little thing put out that the RBI has a lot of the banking assets that it can release to help supplement the 25,000 crores that the ministry is giving.
So that's one alternative. There are many other alternatives as far as strengthening the capital base of these banks are concerned. They have a host of non-core assets. They can be much, and we've gone through and really poured over their balance sheets and their operating practices. They can be much more productive in terms of how they use their capital assets. They can do much better on the recovery side as well. They can reduce some of their more capital intensive activities. So there's a whole range of things that are possible. Obviously RBI, and don't forget please, you should also understand, I can tell you as an investor, when interest rates come down, nice things happen on the asset side.
Two questions. Just a note of skepticism. Talking to Mr. Nayak, who headed the Nayak committee, etc., and we had a big seminar, a very engaging seminar, and he was saying that all of these Indradhanush proposals would actually not solve the governance issues in the public sector banks, and and the fact is that this arm's length approach towards the government, etc. The Bank Bureau is one yet intermediate state, in a public sector banking sector, which is very used to getting instructions and not exercising its own due diligence. But the second issue is that the sectors underlying this bad performance, for example the power sector, unless you solve that tariff problem there, Uday is not going to solve it.
Political economy issues.
I mean,
unless
we completely understand all these issues. Now, first of all, Mr. Nayak has a particular point of view. I would not agree with his point of view. We are doing a lot of transformational things as far as these banks are concerned, as the banks themselves will tell you. So let us see how it works out. The proof of the pudding lies in the eating. Now, with respect to Uday and the DISCOMs, you know that the memorandum of understanding that's been signed as part of Uday is very clear about tariff reform. These state governments have signed up for tariff reform. So again, let's hope that they follow through. I'm quite sure that they will. That has been something that the Power Minister has been very clear about.
The one issue that got a lot of smokes, and if I may say a lot of bashers going, was the divestment proceeds. You talking about divestment proceeds once again, and this includes strategic sale of about 59,500 crore rupees. I mean, no budget, at least in the last 10 years, has been able to meet that one. So they have a lot of questions here. But first up, my question. Why go for such tall order when it's difficult to be met, and you're almost throwing the ball in Niti Ayog's court to decide which are the strategic sales that should happen?
No, we obviously want to make sure that we are able to get the most value for these assets on behalf of the people of India. That's really our goal. We are taking a transformational approach there as well, which is in fact reflected and it's a very important signal that we've renamed the Department of Disinvestment. It's now called the Department of Investment and Public Asset Management.
Right,
so we want to take a very new approach. There's a new policy that's on their website. Please go take a look at it. But there are 3 or 4 things that are fundamentally changing. Number one, we've said that we are going to aggressively pursue strategic disinvestment, and case in point, we have IDBI Bank, where we've already said we're going to drop below 50%, as and when all of the stars line up over there. So clearly we are, prepared to go through and do strategic disinvestment. Number 2, we are willing to look at a variety of innovative ways to be able to monetize assets. So Honorable Finance Minister yesterday spoke about asset recycling. We could have a scheme where, for example, NTPC could take some of its power plants. We could take some projects from NHAI, bundle it together into a portfolio of yield generating assets, which NIF, for example, could take over as a brownfield yield generating fund. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about as far as asset recycling is concerned. We are talking about share buybacks. Also, we have said that we are obviously willing to consider strategic disinvestment, transfer of control in terms of some of these entities. And finally, we've opened the door to listing the general insurance companies, 4 of them very valuable companies, market leaders.
Why is privatization such a taboo word in your government when it wasn't in Mr. Vajpayee's?
I think unfortunately that term has certain connotations with certain people that makes it less than desirable. I myself have always used the word transformation, and I'm very careful when I talk about IDBI Bank. I always use the word transformation because privatization, if I may explain, privatization is only a means to an end. Unless these companies become competitive, unless they are able to take on the market share of the private sector competitors, unless we achieve that outcome, what are we doing for the people of India? We are not doing anything. So privatization is simply a transfer of ownership. It's much more important to create value, to create a transformation, as has been done in many other economies. So I think the transformation process is so much more important.
Why have you singled out only IDBI Bank? Because the same treatment could have been given to the other banks also.
Mythili, please go back and look at the facts. The reality is that all the other public sector banks are covered under the Bank Nationalization Act. IDBI is not. If we were to try and do something else, we would have to go back to Parliament. And there is no national consensus on dropping below 51% on those banks.
You have a question on Suti?
Can I just ask?
Just 1 second, sir. You have a question on Suti?
Well, I have a question on Suti, which is that there are about 65,000 exactly in Air India, in L&T, in not Air India, L&T, ITC, tobacco company, and there's a third company,
Axis Bank.
Axis Bank.
And there is a lot of mention in the press that the government might finally, after 20 years, be moving towards selling these assets.
And keeping those stakes?
Is there any more?
I mean, all alternatives are under consideration.
This
why going for
all alternatives are under consideration?
That's 39,500 crore. Just 1 second. That's 39,500 crore including
all alternatives are under consideration.
You're not giving me. You're almost giving me.
You actually settled there for a 70,000 crore income from spectrum sale. My question is that
98,000.
And my question there is that you are actually making an intermediate input so expensive that you're really going to convert these utilities into non-competitive and non-affordable entities.
And NPAs
and NPAs later on. And
so Rajiv, let me break down that number for you.
No, but the general question is
I don't think you've got those numbers right. So let me explain that to you.
Even if the numbers are not right, the government, since the CAGs, strictures, etc., has tended to follow this policy of maximizing revenue from the sale of these intermediate inputs, rather than facilitate the growth and lowering the cost of these intermediate inputs and make them more affordable, which is what they should
I think there is a happy sort of medium there. What's possible is to be able to get revenue, which we need, of course, as a state, while at the same time not making it unaffordable. The 99,000 crore number needs to be explained. 20,000 crore of that is coming from licenses. Some 26,000 crore is coming from arrears from this year. and then the remainder is coming from spectrum. So the
70,000 that's coming
the
from
spectrum number, it's it's in the 70s, right?
Yeah, that's what I
70,000
thought.
so.
This is why I know.
So the spectrum number relative to what TRAI put out of 5 lakh crores and so on is overall, we think, a relatively conservative and affordable number.
Sure. You want to come in on the rural economy and Manrega? Yes, we'll have both of you there.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things is of course about Manrega, and I mean a lot of people have raised eyebrows that this government, after criticizing it earlier, has now gone back to it.
The highest ever allocation.
Yes, so the highest ever allocation. Now, it has been that it was, by many indicators, been a wasteful process, a wasteful system of spending money in the past. Why do you think you will be able to do a much better job than in the past? Or is it the case that, oh, we have a drought, we have to do something, and this is existing system, let's just use it?
Well, let me add to that, and actually, or subtract from that. I had the impression, or some of us had the impression, that, to use a transformative word, the Narendra would not be the Narendra that we've come to know and love, but will be completely transformed in terms of a very different project of spending money and building assets. Any clarity on that?
Surjit, I know you've had very kind words for Narendra.
I know.
So let me tread cautiously here.
As Agriculture Minister, I wanted to ask you that yes, the government has increased the allocations hugely, and that's a very good thing.
It's not actually factually. That please correct them.
Okay.
This is half the amount in real terms of what was started out in 2008.
No, I'm not talking about Narendra, I'm talking about agriculture as a whole.
Yeah.
But even there, what one was looking for in agriculture reform was reform in terms of inputs as well as outputs. So that in the input side you remove the subsidies, on the output side you remove the distortions. So that you have a free market working in agriculture the way you do have in industry. The 1991 reforms in industry repeated in agriculture. That has not been happening.
A lot of people say you've done a lot, but it's meager and not game changing. So
and there is no framework for agriculture. And
it can potentially be game changing. That's what I want.
So anyway, you're asking 2 or 3 different questions.
Yes,
let me address
one by one.
Let me address them. First, Narendra. Second, agricultural reform. Number 3, how are we going to transition to more sustainable, high-value agriculture? Obviously, we spent a lot of time thinking about these subjects. Lots of consultations, lots of debates, etc. I can assure you, as somebody who comes from a very rural area myself and has spent a lot of time on Narendra work sites, that we are truly changing the way Narendra is done. So what we are really trying to do as far as Narendra is concerned is to really focus it on water related projects, of which there is a real need in rural India right now, and really focus Narendra on the generation of productive assets as opposed to just make work. And there are a whole host of areas in which people can do very, very important water related projects. They are also listed in the budget. We've talked about 5 lakh फार्म पॉन्ड्स, गहरीकरण, जो झील का गहरीकरण जो होता है, उसमें अगर लोग काम पे लग जाएं तो उसका काफ़ी लाभ हम लोगों को मिल सकता है.
With machinery.
That is being discussed and debated right now to see exactly how much it should be done and so on. But the notion here is that we can deploy people into these very much needed projects related to water, water harvesting, deepening of farm ponds, compost pits, etc., etc. So it's very much focused on the generation and development of productive assets. Right. So in that sense we are changing, we are in fact trying to change Narendra, and of course execution, making sure that the whole system is geared to be able to do that takes some time, and we are in the middle of all of that right now. So that's the answer on the Narendra side. We also recognize that under drought conditions, the income support, the ability to be able to provide work to people who can't grow a crop is also an important aspect of running humane and compassionate government, and also a government that wants to ensure that we are protecting the poor through very adverse events that in many cases have no sort of fault of their own, that they're suffering from all of that. So that is the way we are thinking about Narendra. Now coming to this question of agricultural markets. The world over, Mythili, you have to recognize and appreciate, again I'm not an economist, so this is just based on my very rudimentary understanding of this, is that agricultural markets are not free markets anywhere in the world, because this is a sensitive area of the political economy. There are a lot of livelihoods involved, but and so there are
internally they are not vis-a-vis.
No, but we are. But that being said, but that's true.
Is a tradable product.
That is true, but the whole world over, because of the sensitivity associated with it, the political economy associated with it, there are are all kinds of distortions and subsidies prevalent in agriculture around the world. Now, obviously what we are trying to do in India is to ensure that ultimately at the end of the day the income of our farmers and the economic security of our farmers goes up, because we have so many people whose livelihoods and their future depends on agriculture. And so we have taken it upon ourselves as a very explicit goal to double farmer incomes, and we believe we can do that by giving them the resources, irrigation, fertilizer, soil health, as well as the opportunity through the rural roads, Gram Sadak, and access to markets to be able to sell their produce at better prices, provide them the information, etc., etc. We are also working towards, and now I'm coming to the final question about how do we transition to more sustainable high value agriculture. Right. We are also opening up a range of agri-related activities, whether it is horticulture, greenhouse based agriculture, fisheries, dairying, and so on, where poultry farms, where people are going to be able to diversify from just pure one crop rain fed agriculture to a much more diversified, robust agricultural income generation.
Until Punjab continues to grow paddy, will our agriculture actually become sustainable?
And again, Rajiv, I must remind you, I am an engineer and a practical person, not an economist. You see, it's all about the transitions.
No, but that's what
we started off this.
There is no transition.
Rajiv, we started off the show talking about EPFO. Okay, the economic logic or the economists would say bring them on par and treat them this way. Yeah. The transition from here to there and people's expectations and where people are right now makes it very difficult to do these transitions. Similarly, in Punjab, there's a whole ecosystem and a set of behaviors that are attached to this form of agriculture. Now, how do you do that transition? It's not that simple.
If I may take a last question on the behalf of all the budget bashers here and bashers outside, there were allegations about your government being a little elitist. Do you think you've done away with that accusation with this one budget alone?
I must remind you of the Honorable Prime Minister's speech on May 20th, 2014 in the Central Hall of Parliament. It's a historic speech. Please do look it up on YouTube. In that speech, the Honorable Prime Minister said very clearly, हमारी सरकार गरीबों की सरकार है, गरीबों को समर्पित सरकार है. These were literally his first official words after becoming Prime Minister of this great country of ours. So he made it very clear what his priorities were, and frankly those are the priorities of our party. That is the ideology of our party. Our whole thinking of Antyodaya is based on that. And I will tell all of you, and I will implore all of you as citizens of this country, I think it is our moral and sacred responsibility to ensure that first and foremost we end poverty and destitution in this country. And by the way, the very happy thing is that there is no trade-off. You can be completely pro-poor, which of course we are, and because we are completely pro-poor, we are also pro-markets as well. If our markets don't work well, if we don't generate the economic surpluses, if our companies and our businesses don't thrive and flourish, we don't have innovation, how are we going to really take care of the poor and their needs, which of course is a moral responsibility.
One question.
That's the change in the mindset.
I will indulge in one question alone.
How you, and I'm really asking, how are we different from UPA budgets?
Completely,
everybody
is saying this to me now.
Completely and utterly different. You see, you can create, Rajiv, you can create tropes, you can create narratives, you can go and start, making a hawa out of that. But the reality is that the UPA was very clearly consumption driven, demand side oriented, entitlement oriented, crystal clear. We are absolutely crystal clear, supply side oriented, investment driven, empowerment driven. All of these are terms we've used over and over again. We've said we want to build the productive capacity of this country.
It's wonderful that you've so clearly defined that.
But you've not done away with the entitlements, just to be a basher myself.
Narendra is a wonderful example. Narendra is a wonderful example of how you can take the same scheme and as your economic philosophy changes, transform it into something completely different, which is really what we're doing. We have to give our poor farmers the resources so that they can cope with drought, they can be more resilient, and they can move towards more sustainable, high value add agriculture.
On that note, I'm sorry, we've completely run out of time here, but Mr. Sinha, so kind of you to have taken all our budget bashing right on, and thank you very much viewers for tuning in. Far from it actually. Thank you viewers for tuning in. Jayant Sinha in an exclusive conversation with ET Now on Budget Bash-Up.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.